This is video number 7, and we're going to talk about parasite protection. Parasites in the insect world include ticks and leeches. They find a host to suck their blood to survive. So essentially, you are the host, and somebody out there is the parasite. So same in the digital world. You have other people who are linking to your images, to your videos, and other big files. Now, this is not to be confused by backlinks. These are not people who are linking to your site because your site is of a good resource. These are people who are linking to you because they're either claiming your images as theirs, your videos as theirs, and your big files as theirs. So you might be thinking, why would somebody do that? Well, that's very, very common if you think about it. If you've got images on your website, most likely Google has indexed your images into their Google image search engine. And somebody else has come along the image search engine and look for an image, and they might think, oh, I like that image, I'm going to use that on my website. And either they might give you credit, which is great, but that's far and few. And then most likely they might think, well, I like this image, I'm going to link to it, and I'm going to put it on my web host. Now, if you get too many of those, eventually what happens is they begin to use your server resources that you pay for. They're not paying for it, you're paying for it. And then they use your videos and they're going to use your bandwidth that you pay for. So keeping that in mind, you're going to need to protect yourself, right? So, like I said, what ends up happening is that you are spending money on more web hosting resources. Now, the way that you can protect yourself with this is by using what we call cPanel, which is a web hosting panel, a very popular one that most web hosting companies use. Now, if you don't have cPanel and you're one of those far and few between, in those cases, sometimes your web hosting company will have rebranded the cPanel to look like their own brand, but usually you can find the hot linking feature that I'm going to talk about in just a minute right there. If not, sometimes they will have their own hot linking feature, but essentially what it does is it disables people from essentially becoming a parasite of your website and using your server resources. So if your web hosting company doesn't use cPanel, like I said, they may have that option. And if they don't, you can always message them and say, hey, do you have hot link protection? Now, to better understand how to implement this, let me show you step by step how to do that. So what you want to do is go ahead and log into your cPanel. If you need to do that, go ahead and pause the video and do that now. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that you are in your cPanel. So to get to hot link protection, all you need to do is simply scroll down and go to the security section here, and we see hot link protection. So go ahead and click on that. And if you look at it, it says hot link protection prevents other websites from directly linking to you. So what we need to do is, we don't need to enable it yet, but what we need to do is enter the URLs to allow access. So what this means is that, let's say, for example, let's just hypothetically use yourdomain.com. What you want to do is enter yourdomain.com, and what that means is that anytime yourdomain.com accesses the image, it's okay. But anytime somebody else that is not yourdomain.com accesses your site, then they will be denied, essentially. So what you want to do is do http:// and then yourdomain.com. And that should be it. But if you use www or you have, let's say, HTTPS, you could add that as well. Now, hypothetically, that shouldn't really matter, but for the sake of just to make sure, we'll just do that. So these are just variations of yourdomain.com. So we can enter that here. And let's say, for example, that you want a other site. Let's say you have a yourseconddomain.com. If you put http://yourseconddomain.com. So let's say, for example, that you have a sister site, and that sister site, it'll be okay if they access your images. So you want to enter that here. So basically what you're telling the system is these domains are okay with accessing these images or whatever file that is. So if you want to add, like, let's say MP4 files. So if you have videos on your site and you only want these sites to access them, you want to make sure that you have the file formats inside here. So another thing, if there are zip files, downloadable .zip files, you want to put zip. So that means anytime somebody accesses any type of these file formats from these sites, it's okay. If they access it elsewhere from somebody else, it's going to block them. It's going to prevent them. Now, you have different choices. You can enter a redirect URL. So if somebody tried to access that image and they're doing so from a different site, then you can redirect them to another page. So whatever page that you want. And this can be good depending on what kind of business you're in. So for example, if you are a photographer and you don't mind people licensing your images, then you could redirect them to maybe your page where you're trying to sell licensing to images. Now, obviously, if you're not in that case, then you wouldn't really need that. But that's just there if you want to redirect people to a certain page. So once you're done, you just simply click submit and then you click enable and you're good to go. This is video number 8, and we're going to talk about WordPress caching. So as discussed earlier, the way caching works is your internet browser makes a copy of the items on the page, such as images, text, and other media elements. So as you can imagine, the purpose of this is that the next time you visit a website, your browser will load the site at a much faster rate. Now, you can do the same thing with your WordPress site so that your returning visitors can experience the same thing. So that way they visit it once and it might load somewhat slow, but the next time they visit it, it'll load really, really fast. So let's discuss some of the most popular caching plugins right now. So when it comes to WordPress caching plugins, a lot of times you'll see that a lot of people will say that the W3 Total Cache is the biggest, baddest, best plugin out there. Now, we've had the chance to test this out, and yes, it does have good results, but at the same time, it's very complex and there's a lot of different settings within it. So there's somewhat of a learning curve in order to use this. Now, the next one that is on the recommended list is the WP Super Cache, and that is by Automatic. And if you're not familiar with Automatic, as you can see here, that's Automatic. This is the same company that has developed WordPress. So they are literally the biggest WordPress company because they invented WordPress. If you look through here, you'll see that a lot of people have installed it. A lot of the reviews are really good. They say lightning's fast speed, works really well. And that's the thing I like about Automatic is that whenever you get plugins from them, you're pretty much guaranteed that the plugin will run. And it will run effectively because they'll come out with tons and tons of updates simply because they invented WordPress. So they have the best of the best knowledge as far as that goes. Now, these are caching plugins that focus on one area. Another plugin that we have actually tested and had really good results is vipercache.com. That's vipercache.com. All right, that's it. This is video number 9, and we're going to talk about content delivery networks. So we briefly talked about this earlier, but in most cases, when you run a website, you want to have a CDN or a content delivery network, especially if you're trying to reach the world. Now, as we mentioned earlier, if your web hosting server, let's say, for example, is in the United States of America and your prospect is, let's say, in the United Kingdom or Canada or wherever, some way far away, then what happens here is that they have to connect all the way from their computer in the UK all the way to the server in the USA. So if you are in the US of A, or you're in wherever you are and the server happens to be next to you, then it's going to load super, super fast, right? But just because it loads fast for you, if you're in the United States, does not mean that it's going to load super fast for everybody else. So it's kind of like saying, okay, I'm going to go to the store and it's only going to take me 5 minutes. But then you have a friend that is an hour away and it's going to take them literally an hour away, not speaking of traffic and other possible roadblocks that he's going to face. So that's why you need a content delivery network. And in this case, in that example, let's say, for example, it takes you 5 minutes to get to the store. And that store says, you know what, we're going to replicate ourselves and we're going to put a store near your friend so that instead of going 1 hour away, he goes about 5 minutes away. So that's the way a content delivery network works. They are so massive of a data center that they have many different servers placed all over the world, oftentimes in each city, in each country, in each state, literally so that anybody around the world can access your site at a much faster rate. So oftentimes what we see is the content delivery network will make a big, big difference. So if you change your web hosting to a specialized WordPress hosting and you add a content delivery network and you do the elements that we talked about to make sure that your site is not too big, those things, those few things there can actually speed up your whole site. So like I said, how CDNs work is they deliver the content, in this case, to that person, to the closest server to them. So as we mentioned in this example, if you're using a CDN, it's going to show your website to that person, to the closest server. So it really makes life a lot better for your visitors, no matter where they are. So now there are many other benefits to using a CDN besides just being close. In addition to that is security. And you can actually block out high-risk areas and high-risk IP addresses as well. Because the CDN is so big and massive, a lot of times it'll share data, and if it finds that there's a hacker hacking another site, they'll share that data and make sure that they block that person when they try to access your site. So there are a lot of other amazing benefits to having a CDN. Now, there are several CDNs that you can use. You, of course, only need to have one. So let's discuss that right now. So there are two main content delivery networks that we highly, highly recommend. There are many other ones, but you really have to think about it. You want to make sure that the company that you go with is big enough so they have so many different servers around the world that you can use. So these two are actually very user-friendly, and that is why we are actually recommending them. Cloudflare.com, that's Cloudflare.com. This one we've used before, and in order to really make use of it, they have a free version, but in order to get the advantages and the benefits, you really have to use the $20 per month upgrade. And this is on a per domain basis. Now, at the end of the day, and that might seem a lot to many of you, but really, it'll save you a lot of bandwidth. In fact, it'll protect you. It'll give you security that you need. Plus, on top of that, if you have a global wide network, you're trying to reach as many people around the world as much as possible, it really is going to help you in the long run. The only case that you would never really need to have a CDN is if you're only a local business and you're simply trying to cater to people within a very small segment of a city and they're all next to the server. So that's the only time that you would not really use a CDN. Cloudflare we've used and it's worked very, very well. and we highly recommend that. You don't really need the business version or the enterprise unless you're getting a ton of traffic. But obviously you can start with free and just see how that goes. And then as time goes, upgrade to pro if you can. So if you're just starting out, obviously go with the free. And if you already have a couple hundred to a couple thousand visitors per month, definitely go with the pro version as much as possible. So the next thing we have is MaxCDN. That is maxcdn.com. And as you can see, the pricing is actually a little bit cheaper than Cloudflare. Now, MaxCDN is really good as well. And it's really hard to say whether MaxCDN is better than Cloudflare or Cloudflare is better than MaxCDN. Because at the end of the day, it really depends on really your preference. So you could start with MaxCDN because it's only $9 a month and they offer a good amount of benefits as well. Now you'll see that they limit you up to 1 terabyte. So what that means is really unless you're using 1 terabyte, which is 1,000 gigabytes worth of bandwidth, you don't really need to move up. So that's the nice thing about MaxCDN is the pricing definitely wins a little bit better than Cloudflare. But as far as setup goes for both of these are actually very easy to set up. They've made it very, very user-friendly, and that's one of the main reasons why we recommend them on top of their huge network and being able to reach as many visitors as you can.